Good morning. It is February 28th, 2024. Today is Ordinance and Policy Committee. Present today are appointed officials: Chandra Phillips as Finance Officer, Justin Day as Public Safety Commissioner, Paul Jensen, the City Attorney. I also have Code Enforcement Officer and Planning and Zoning Director Daniel Furness here, and City Council representatives Austin Clunt and Brad Schramm. This time I'll turn the committee over to Mr. Jensen to guide us through the agenda.
Good morning. We just have some proposed policy changes in front of you to be considered today. I'll apologize for one thing. Yesterday, I honestly thought we were going to have a couple of ordinances ready for us to review. We do not have those ready today. One is still stuck in some language up in Pier, making sure that what the legislature ends up with. And the other, I just was actually not quite ready. So at any rate, on policy matters, we start out talking about the telephone policy. A little bit of a tweak here to bring ourselves into compliance as far as what our policy provides versus what actual reality does, because we do have some cell phones that are assigned out by department heads to on-duty employees in some of these departments, and frankly, that language was not covered in the policy, and so we've included that here to make sure that we're in compliance with our own written policies. The other thing was really just a matter of tweaking the language a little bit so that it allows the city to issue cell phone directly to a department. The department head then assigns it out, whether it's daily, weekly, whatever, to whichever of their employees needs it. The most common example of that is going to be a police officer. The department has a couple of cell phones that they make available, and frankly, you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they basically require that the officer carry the city's cell phone on duty when they're on their normal duty tour. So those are the main things. I also struck some language in there because there's competing language in here. It reflects the fact that there are a few certain employees within the city who, because of the number of cell phones that they would be required to carry, they frankly combine some of their work stuff with their personal stuff and do it all off of one phone. The policy in one place just basically cautions and says, number one, it's the information on there continues to belong to the city, and your contacts with regard to that belong to the city. But we had some other language in here that basically forbade any city business being done on personal cell phone, and I don't think that's ever been the intention to have an outright prohibition. So we wanted to just clean that language up to make sure that, again, we're in compliance with our own policy. So
it says they cannot do city business on a personal cell phone?
You can, under the policy as changed, you can do that. It's just, like I say, there's a caution there that it makes that cell phone is subject to whether it's a subpoena, whether it's to have the department head inspect it, things like that. Now, that exact language isn't in the policy, but that's the net effect of it. If you do city business on your personal cell phone becomes treated as if it was city property for purposes of inspecting it, the information that's on it, the data that's on it, your contacts that belong to the city, those continue to belong to the city and are subject to review by the city.
Just a few years ago, we went complete opposite and said no personal phones in city business. Now we're going complete opposite again and saying you can.
This is
That's not
trying
what I
to,
want.
trying to put us in the middle around where frankly, where we are.
But it's because employees are being stubborn and saying we won't carry two phones.
No, actually, it's not.
What is it then?
You guys actually in a budget season approved for the police department to go get 2 extra cell phones, which was against policy. And we can go back and look at camera and get that information. You guys said, go ahead and get them this year. And yep, make sure you budget for them next year. That's fine. So the police department, you guys budgeted for. The other issue that we're finding is the water department with the core and main. They are required to have droids for that. Not everyone wants a personal droid, and when they're changing out these meters, when they, SCADA, whichever system it is, when they're resetting the meters, they have to use some type of device like that. Then the SCADA reports back to them when they're on call, and so there's becoming a difficulty of when they're trying to read those systems of it getting back, and then it has to go directly to their personal phone
We
or.
have iPads.
With, the electric department has iPads and they're able to use that. This system will not speak to an iPad. It has to be a droid, that's what I know. The pool phone, I can tell you what we did last year, and for several years, they've had an issue at the pool with they can't hear the landline because it's just too loud out there, so they weren't able to hear the landline, and they had to be right where it was because that's where the phone jack was. And then when they were cleaning, and so they weren't right there, and people were trying to schedule their lessons. That
I
was
mean, they
the
can't hear the landline ring?
Nope, so they wanted a cell phone, so they took the on-call electric cell phone that wasn't technically being used anymore because it was, we have a landline that gets forwarded to numbers, and the electric department was fine with that, getting forwarded to their personal numbers. So they took the electric on-call and gave it to the pool to be used so it could be carried with someone at all times. The same situation is happening out at the recycle center, so I apologize, Paul, this just came up yesterday. They're no longer using the on-call water phone anymore because they're just having a number sent directly to their personal numbers when they're on call. So they took that number and they want to use it at the landfill so that they can forward the landfill line to, if they're not open at the recycle center, they can still answer calls that come through for the recycle. So they would forward that to a department head's
And
phone.
the other thing that I recall as part of the discussion is the fact that the departments that don't have all of their employees carrying a city phone, their own supervisors or other workers will call them on the job a lot of times on their personal cell because they need to make that contact during the day where they're not in the vehicle, not with the radio. And the example that I recall being given was guys working in the sewer department where they're 2 blocks apart and need to be able to communicate with each other. They would call their other member who didn't have a city-assigned cell phone, but they would call the personal cell phone because they needed to be able to make that contact. I recall that was also part of the discussion.
I haven't heard that complaint since this policy went through about employees not wanting to answer their personal numbers.
No, I haven't either.
And so that's why I would hesitate to say that that's why this policy is getting changed. I think
No,
it's
it's-
because of our systems that we have and needing to be able to change it right there and then. I know Troy told me he doesn't want SCADA on their personal phones because that's kind of dangerous. So,
How many departments are we talking about?
the
Water, sewer, police has already been affected. Electrical's already done.
Yeah, they don't want them. Well,
So
as far
we're-
as I know, they don't want them.
We're talking about water and sewer essentially.
Essentially 3 new phones for water and sewer above and beyond what we have right now. And only 2 currently because 1 we don't have an employee for, so.
In the sewer, right?
They're saying water and sewer wants every person to have a city phone.
That's my understanding, due to the system with the SCADA and resetting meters.
Don't we have radios?
Not for SCADA,
Huh?
not for the SCADA.
Yeah,
Yeah, but one person has a phone for this SCADA thing, and if I have to call another water person, why don't I get on the radio and say, Bill, you got a copy?
because if you're out changing a meter, you're not gonna have a radio on, the radio from the pickup with you.
Why not?
You can hear
I
the
mean,
radio in
it
the
clips to
pickup.
your collar, it clips to your belt.
I didn't know they could I didn't know they were portable, so.
Well, the radios we have at my work, I don't put it on till I get to work. I don't believe that we should have one city employee get one city text on his personal cell phone, because I have personal texts on my personal cell phone that I don't care to have any city employee at any time in any court of law be able to read. Ask Fannie Willis.
She doesn't work for us, thank God.
I understand that,
But
but
the
my point
illustration
is
is-
exactly the same. We start putting city information on my personal phone,
Right.
and that gives her the right to look at my personal information, and that's not
It
right.
gives your department head, your own supervisor,
Yeah.
that opportunity.
And that should not be. If we want our people to communicate with our people, we ought to provide them with that communication tool. Whether it's a radio that clips on your belt, or whether it's a cell phone that we provide that everybody has to know the phone number for.
Yeah.
Personally, I like the idea of the radios, because all you gotta do is charge them overnight. You don't have to know what Jason's phone number is, okay? You just have to say, hey, Jason, are you on the radio? And if he's not, he won't answer. If he is, he should answer, and if he doesn't, that's a department problem.
That's a good point, and I agree with it. And I don't know, I'm going to encourage you to have the conversation with Troy and the water department about
Yeah.
this, but the SCADA system is monitored during the course of the night also, and it sends back reports to that cell phone.
Is that cell phone carried by the person that we pay extra money to be on call?
Well, it could
Yes,
be-
and the
it could be
department
just sent
head.
to the on-call phone.
It could be.
I don't know.
I don't know either. That's the question that we have to ask.
I don't think we should change ordinance without knowing all the possibilities.
I will tell you too, there are times that the jail, we have to use the cell phones, and we have to use our personal cell phones, because like coming up this week, we have 12 different personnel that are gonna be involved in various movements at the same time. And if you're in the vehicle and it is information that you don't care if the entire vehicle hears, then you would use the radio. But if it is information that the entire vehicle cannot hear, then you have to be using the cell phone. And the jail doesn't have 12 cell phones to hand out to 12 to 14 various different people. So there are going to be times where this is the only option that we have.
And I get like a phone call, but.
Yeah.
When we just go citywide, and all of a sudden it's text messages, it's pictures, and.
Yeah, and that's,
If I had to turn my phone over and say, look at all my incoming, outcoming calls, no problem.
yeah,
But I don't wanna give my phone to somebody and it's all my family pictures and all my family text.
and that's why
Or
we got,
communications with your girlfriend.
that's why we got city cell phones for the
Yeah,
police
for
department,
most of
was
it.
for that. Well, yeah, because we got 2 department-issued phones now, so anytime we need the general public to send us screenshots of, a possible criminal act over a text message or something, they're sending them all to the city-issued phones. That's obviously a very different scenario than what I just described for jail use. That's just a communication, like heads up, you got a car following way too close, or something like that. Like I said, because there's gonna be information that you don't want the entire car to hear.
Then we need to come up with the money to provide enough city-owned cell phones to solve that problem. It should not be up to Brad Schramm to provide a cell phone so that a fellow cop can communicate with Brad Schramm.
And
That
that's
should
where,
not be Brad's responsibility.
that's where you would be looking at having to, it doesn't make financial sense to have that many cell phones that we're paying for when you're going to not use them on a consistent basis. And the reality is now you gotta try to figure out if you've got 12 people involved in, 3, 4, 5 different transports, now you gotta try to figure out who has which cell phone, which phone number you have to call for which person. So if you know who's on the transport, you just call them quick and say, hey, heads up, this is coming your way, or where we at on this? Because again, Brad, sometimes we're heading out west and then over east and up north, and so.
I brought in
That-
Troy. just
that's
to
a very
answer
unique-
questions.
Yeah, it is, and it is. It's very rare, but just, that is a possibility of a time where we would all be using our personal cells.
Or does he have one there? The very first policy is what we're talking about, Troy. He's got one, I'll take it back. Sorry.
Troy, it's
This is
becoming
a very tough subject, I think.
Let's get clarification, Troy. You and I had a brief conversation on the water department needing additional net, FirstNet phones for SCADA. Can you explain to council what your thought was there?
So we have people that are putting people's account information on their phones. I won't have that on their personal phones. So when they go up to the office and they ask something, they get a question for Brandy, they're taking pictures and they're forwarding those, that account number along with the serial number off the water meter and all that stuff. They take a picture of that, they send it up to Brandy, Brandy puts it on her system, so that gets entered in right. I don't want in any way, shape, or form that stuff to be on the employees' personal phones. That's city business.
I agree, yep.
And they shouldn't be asked to put that on their personal phones either.
How many phones are we looking? 2?
I did get one for Matt and Ricky, and those are water phones.
Right.
So they stay in the water department, they don't go anywhere else. And then Mark replaced a phone of his, that he had a phone that wasn't functioning properly.
The question was, would you give one to the new sewer employee once we get one hired as well?
I have an extra phone for that.
Okay.
The other thing with the employee phones is how we program the radios for the water system. If you have an Android device, which is what we ordered them, they can do that with their Android device, so they don't have to carry along a laptop or anything. They can do it right off their phones. So, a lot cheaper than buying more laptops and all that kind of stuff, so.
And then we talked about pool and recycle and your intention with that. So the pool had a cell phone, an extra cell phone that we had last year, and they used that so they could carry it with them in case they weren't right next to the landline.
Yep.
And then now you guys are talking about
Yeah,
recycle
the
center
pool has
too.
a phone, so that just stays up at the pool.
How about recycle?
Yeah, it's turned in every year.
Recycle.
Recycle.
At the pool?
No, the
The
recycling center.
recycling center.
Oh, the recycle center, yeah, they don't have a, so if Travis leaves, and there's no one in the building, I've got a lot of complaints from people that no one's answering the phone out there. So, we were just gonna use one of the numbers that was assigned to the on-call water department, and just give that phone to Travis, so he's got a phone on him. The other thing that I get a lot of calls for during the work week is cardboard. Some of these people that we go and get cardboard from on a regular basis, they're filling up with cardboard. They don't have any place to store it, so that way they'll have that number to get a hold of Travis. It'll be a direct line to Travis so that they can get a hold of him and he'll get that stuff. But there is not a phone out at the recycle center. So this phone will just stay out there, or else when Travis leaves, it'll be on him. But it'll just stay out at the recycle center.
So in the end, what we're looking at, because the police department was already given permission to do this a year ago during budget season, 3/4 of a year ago. What we're looking at adding is 3 more lines total. Because we're reusing 2 lines that were already there that aren't being utilized for the original purpose for the on-call. So we're just adding 3 more lines at $35 a piece, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so, right around there.
Do we have like a master contract with a cell phone provider?
No contract, because we're a government agency, they can't force us to enter into a contract. So there is no contract. There wasn't with Verizon, there isn't now with FirstNet either.
So it's no different than buying a burner phone
Other than this does give us guarantee if there is a natural disaster and other lines go out, we can still communicate with our department heads throughout the city.
How'd that go last Tuesday?
Not great when AT&T went down because they're AT&T.
FirstNet,
Yeah.
FirstNet went down.
But
yeah.
we were up and running before a lot of the other country was.
The other thing with FirstNet and Dan being our sole provider
Sorry.
is.
No, I agree.
We basically get our phones for nothing. So like, what would normally cost you?
phone is free, but the cost to have it is $35 a month.
Right.
Yep, which is cheaper than what we were getting from Verizon.
Yeah. Well, I'm still of the position that I don't want Troy to be responsible for using his cell phone to do city business.
Let me ask you this, Brad. If you look at the language that I have highlighted and struck out, about 2/3 of the way down, that says who will conduct city business on such phone and not on their personal. If we get rid of the strikeout, so we leave that language in, which is how it has been up till now, does that resolve the concern?
You mean on this page that I've been writing on,
Correct.
okay?
Yep.
So it used to say, a city-owned cell phone will be issued to the appointed officials who will conduct city business on such phone and not on their personal cell phone. I don't know why we're removing that. It shows me that
My question is, if we leave it in, does that resolve the problem?
as long as that says Troy doesn't have to use and shall not be allowed to use his personal cell phone for city business.
I think that's what, the net effect
Because
of that.
otherwise, all that's gonna do is cause all kinds of trouble in the future in the event that Troy should do something
Okay,
erroneous,
okay.
okay?
Austin, do you agree?
Erroneous.
We
Can you elaborate
leave
on
that
the-
in?
Shut up, Fanny.
I mean, I've tried to read the rest of it. I mean, up above it says they can't use his personal cell phone. Or it says no personal phone calls, or while.
Must refrain,
While
yeah.
personal phone calls are not prohibited.
What section's that in, Austin?
So you can't necessarily prohibit personal calls because what if your kid needs picked up from school?
Well, it says it in our policy.
I agree, but that's a struggle because there are times that your family
Well, you
needs
can-
to get a hold of you.
You can have a
and-
policy that says no cell phones.
Yeah,
I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't have cell phones.
no, but there was a landline you could contact them on.
I'd love to.
There's not a lot of landlines for a lot of our
I would love to
departments.
go back to businessman radios on every hit and just.
The other thing to keep in mind is, so we run into this all the time, especially with my supervisors, is it's a small town. And if they can't get a hold of you on your work phone, they pretty much, almost everybody knows your personal cell number and they will just call you on their personal cell number. So then you are technically using your phone for city work.
Yeah.
So there has to be a little bit of lenience in there for everybody. Unless at some point in time, we just say no personal cell phones on you while you're at work. Otherwise,
I think it's up to the supervisor to monitor that it's not getting abused.
And I think that's been the,
I mean, you know.
That's
to
been the
just
plan.
Flat out say when you clock in, set your cell phone
In a locker.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those days are.
Well, that's actually what we do down at the jail. Like, there's boxes and, because obviously you do not want to take a cell phone into anywhere where it can be taken from you, or you talk about security risks. So we actually have that when you come in, your cell phone goes in your box.
But I bet you they don't wait till they clock out to go to that locker.
Oh, no, like if you
That's
get
what I'm getting at.
yeah, if you've got 5 minutes, yeah, we don't care if you take your break or whatever and take a look at it, that's 100%
My only
fine.
point, though, is for the protection of our own employees, we should not allow them to use their personal cell phones for city business. Because when we go into a court of law, okay, give me your phone, I'm gonna read every text message you have, it's gonna be available through the courts, And all that can possibly do is.
But that's only gonna
lead to
be
trouble.
if you were,
That's not gonna be that simple. That's gonna start out with a subpoena
No, I
and an
understand
argument to
that,
the
yeah.
court.
And only a subpoena for those that pertain to what the court
As
thing
long,
is
as
for.
long as this, in a nutshell, says they're not using their personal phone for city business, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, if we leave that wording in, the only place that it absolutely forbids the use of a personal cell phone on the job here is for texting or social media during working time. It says you gotta do that on your own personal break time.
Says that in
Otherwise-
here right now.
Yes,
That's not in the yellow.
it is
That's
not,
the current policy.
it's current policy.
And I-
Okay.
And I think it's important that the water and sewer department has that SCADA system on city phones. If somebody
Yeah.
walks off the job, they don't have
That's,
the
yeah,
SCADA.
so everything job related, that's why I got them those phones.
Yep.
Everything job related needs to be on those city phones. When they leave for the day, unless they're on call, that city phone gets plugged in, stays down at the office, does not go home.
Oh,
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah,
And if we have 6 employees in the water department and we can't afford 6 $35 telephones, we better get out of the water business.
yeah.
the other thing that,
If that's what it sounds like to me, it's $35 to provide a
35 and
phone
some change,
to an
yep.
employee. And we have 6 in water, or I don't know, I made that number up.
A total
How
of
many do we
4.
have in water?
right now we have 3.
3,
We're fully staffed with 4.
okay. So we have 4 in water and how many in sewer?
That's water and
Well, that's
sewer.
water and sewer
4.
combined, that's-
That's both of them together, 4. Yeah. We should not allow them to put city business on their personal phone. Nor should we require them to use their personal phone for any city business. Because why don't we make them bring their own hammer, and bring their own saw,
Well, there was just
whatever you use for plumbing?
an incident here a couple weeks ago where, we were, to fill out a accident report, we were asked to take pictures of where an accident, and there was some damage to city property, and so they were taking pictures of that, and then, they.
On their personal phones.
And then they're sending it up to Jan or Paul or whatever.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be putting that stuff on their own phones. That should be on their city phones.
I agree.
We corrected that 4 or 5 years ago with police. We didn't even realize they were, it's just, we got rid of that problem. We don't need to go backwards.
Okay,
And the other thing is, a lot of guys have contacts on their phones, their business contacts. And if you have your personal phone and you just up and decide to quit, you walk out the door, you're walking out the door with all those contacts, so those contacts need to stay with the city of Winter because that's how we conduct business.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah. So if I leave the language in instead of striking out on that one line, then I think we're resolving.
Yeah,
Okay,
put that back in and send it to full council.
very good.
Thank you. This was something I had asked Paul to change just because I knew it wasn't what we were currently doing. Started off last year during budget season, and I just wanted the policy to reflect it.
thank you.
Yep.
Is on-duty position, is that
On call.
on call?
On duty is on duty. So for instance, like we were talking about the police officers. They've got a couple department phones down at the police department that are for use by the on-duty officer. They're not issued to a particular officer, they're issued to whoever's on duty at the time. Am I right on that?
yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
That's,
And they would share that, the next
They
shift
pass it
coming
on to
on
the
would
next
take
shift.
that phone?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's what, okay, because I wrote myself a question, does that mean on-call?
So that would be the same at the pool, if it's the manager or the assistant manager
When
who's
it's on
in
duty,
charge
on
that
duty,
day.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, next one. One page talking about classifications of full-time employees. There are 2 places where a full-time employee in our policy manual was defined by the 40-hour work week. And because of a certain situation that we're providing an opportunity for, frankly, for a department head to be able to have a little more flexibility with getting employees, sufficient number of employees to maintain the operation as they need to. But once in a while, some of these may not be able to run 40 hours a week, but they can certainly run 42 or 32 or more. So with that, we strictly changed that 40 to a 32. It doesn't change the fact that for most people that are working for the city of Winter, and obviously between budgets and supervisors and appointed officials that are in charge of the departments, they're going to see to it that most of their employees, I mean, this is not going to be a change for most employees. It's just, there may end up being one or two employees throughout the city that might, because of those needs, might end up at a 32 or 34 or 36 hour classification.
The one that's really affected by this is our PSAP,
Yeah.
because they can only be on a 40-hour work week versus the 80-hour work week
Right.
of the police department and corrections. And the way the supervisor has to schedule to cover those hours, there's sometimes that you may see 36 hours in one week or 32 and 44 or 48 in the next week. And the way the policy is written now, Chandra, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to have 40 hours for them to maintain benefits with the city of Winter when it's not possible
And that's
in
the
that
rub.
department.
Yep.
I mean, we're still keeping 80 in a 2-week period though.
Not for PSAP.
We're gonna
PSAP will
try
be
to.
40 per
PSAP
week.
doesn't qualify for that?
Correct.
PSAP and certain law enforcement and certain corrections. So it'll now be defined in their job description who qualifies for it.
Yep.
And that's the next policy that'll be
But
on
if
the
they
next
do
page.
that scenario that the mayor just talked about, 32 one week and 44 the next,
Correct.
they get paid overtime for between 40 and 44.
Yes, they do.
100%, yes.
Right.
So this does not change overtime. This
Right.
just changes how many hours you are required to have in order to qualify for full-time benefits. And this is actually very common in a lot of places. They don't put it at 40 because what if your employee clocked out early every single day and so they're at 39.5? They would still qualify for their full-time benefits because they have it at 32, 36, 38. I've seen it at all of those.
But if they're doing that, should they be entitled to those full-time benefits?
They are allowed
If they're
to still.
cutting 15 minutes off of each week?
That's up to the department head. Also, they can use their benefits, i.e. vacation, sick, comp, to make up to that 40 hours.
And most of the departments are, the reason this affects the PSAP is because they are a 24-hour, 365 type operation. So it could be that you're gonna be scheduled for 48 hours this week, and then the next week, you're gonna have your 80 hours in 2 weeks, but because they don't fall under the 80 and 2, then they now have to work 32 hours the next week because of when the shift change happens, or the schedule changes or whatever. That then allows them to keep their full-time benefits because they had the actual hours, but the way that it splits out, if they go to a different shift or something like that, then this allows them to keep their full-time benefits without having to pay back.
The interesting part about this is that it's not at the fault or request of or within the power of the employee themselves.
Yeah.
As to whether their schedule is going to keep them at 40 plus every week. And so under that scenario, you've got these weeks with 32 hours. Chandra, you correct me if I'm wrong, but if a full-time employee doesn't make 40 hours in a week, that employee can be required to reimburse the city for a portion of their costs from the health insurance if they're not putting in 40 hours a week. Well, is that really going to be the intention under this scenario where we used to be able to get away with doing 80 hours a week? We came to the understanding under Fair Labor Standards Act that we can't do that with the PSAP. We can't do the 80 hours in 2. We're stuck with the 40 hours per week. And in order to make the scheduling work, you're gonna be able to,
So do you want, so do you take out the last few words of that 6-4-1 that says 32 or more hours a week or 80 hours in 2 weeks?
Because
No,
we
'cause
still have
the-
certain departments that qualify for the 80 and 2 week. Your law enforcement officers qualify for 80 and 2 weeks.
Right.
And the majority of your corrections department qualifies for 80 and 2 weeks. So you still have both of those qualifications
Right.
throughout the city. So this covers all the employees throughout the city.
Is this an insurance problem?
Nope.
Or is this an,
Fair Labor Standards
It's a
Act.
federal problem.
It's a federal
yep,
employment law.
okay.
Yep, that's the problem. It's the same, Fair Labor Standards Act is the one that most Americans know because we require to be paid overtime past 40.
Correct.
That starts where FLSA is. But there are so many different regulations, and I don't know how much of this we need to go into today, but I can tell you that Chandra and I have many hours of work into making sure and going through our own payroll policies and practices to make sure that we're in compliance with FLSA. And one of the things that we discovered that we didn't know is that communication workers employed in a PSAP do not qualify for the 80 and 2. They qualify for 40-hour work week. And so there's been a lot of catching up with things and making sure, and of course, she and Rhonda had to work together to do a whole lot of stuff on payroll to make sure that everything was working, but this is one of the things that we needed to fix.
Do we currently schedule our PSAP people based on 80 hours, where I get 32 this week and 48 the next week, and no overtime?
That's happened, yeah, depending on how Andrea makes the schedule and then who's moving from morning to afternoon to night. And yeah, that's pretty common within that 24-hour cycle period that you have to work, because we have to have it covered. Like I said, 365.
But the reason for the 80 hours in 2 weeks, isn't that to avoid overtime of 40 hours a week?
That's also the federal labor standard law, though.
Yeah.
Only.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, so the law says that certain qualified employees are exempt from the 40 hours a week, and they have it very clearly defined who is exempt from that. It is police officers and correctional officers that are charged with upholding the law.
And
That's it. Doesn't matter if you're a 24/7 facility, they don't care about that. It is if you were charged with upholding the law. So if you are a police officer that is just handing out parking tickets or checking the meter, you do not qualify for that 80. If you were the front desk person in the police department, you do not qualify for that 80. If you were maintenance and corrections, you do not qualify for that.
Our medical does,
Medical does
Medical
not
people.
qualify.
medical does not,
Do not, that's right.
PSAP does
The
not.
reality is, Brad, that the PSAPs are not seen. And we highly disagree with this, but they're not seen as first responders. They don't get the same retirement that the police and the corrections do. They're not seen as first responders like police and corrections are. And so they also don't fall under the 80 and 2 like police and corrections do.
Well, let's just see how things function when we don't have those PSAP people
That's what we've said the
at
whole
their
time.
phone.
But
In
it's
order to
not,
get
it's
a
not
cop
based off of
there. I
first
agree, but they
responders.
don't see it
I
that
do
way.
want that stated. It's not based off of if you're a first responder. There are separate rules for fire departments that are full-time. There are separate rules for nurses. So the first responders has nothing to do with this federal law. This has to do simply with, they allowed the federal law to be for those who are charged with upholding the law. You can't make the argument that a PSAP officer is sworn in through South Dakota law they don't have arresting power, essentially. So that's, and corrections officers, do they have arresting power? No, but they are still required to make sure that they are upholding the law to keep the people in jail because the courts charge them with controlling them in the jail.
What it is people made decisions that never did this type of work.
So it's really about a classification, is it not?
Yep.
Rather than a pay or a rate of pay.
Correct.
And so if I am classified as a full-time employee, all that does is make me eligible for, quote, full-time benefits.
Yes.
So the PSAP, I understand those hours, the corrections, they work 32 hours one week, 44 the next week. Are they paid 4 hours overtime?
No, because they're exempt, because they go off of anything over 80 hours in 2 weeks is when their overtime kicks in. So, no,
That's what I wanted to make sure.
yeah. Same with the police department.
Because PSAP is considered that on the pay side, but not on the benefit side evidently.
Well, now it'll be, no, see, now on the pay side too, they will be anything over 40 will be overtime. And then that's why we made it with the 32 in case it happens with the scheduling. Then this employee doesn't have to use a vacation day or a benefit or pay back
In order to receive their full benefits.
in order to receive their full benefit. So
If they want
it's-
to, if they want to get it to 40 that week, they can use their benefit to get them to 40. Let's say they're scheduled for 32, they still get their full benefits. That's all we're going to require them to have on there. But if they want to be paid for 40, then they can use that vacation, sick, comp time, whatever they
And
have.
whoever it is that's requiring this, it's not a matter of an average throughout the year, it's a matter of this particular week.
Correct.
What I
or not
understand, yep,
full-time.
the feds set this one.
It's not an average.
No.
Typical.
Yep.
So if that ever happens where somebody puts in 31 hours, then they either have to use vacation or sick leave.
They'll have to do something to get them up. Yep,
Which right now we have it at 40 and that's how we're holding it.
So
correct.
what if, I'm just making a, the one in a million chance that.
He'll have to lie and tell you he had a sick day.
No, I'm just saying like a one in a, because it could happen where like an employee was being reprimanded or something, like they were put on leave without pay, or put on leave with pay.
Yeah, so that's covered in different policy. If we put them on leave without pay, we can't require them to pay back benefits
Correct.
because we punish them.
Correct.
They would still get that. They wouldn't get the hours, but they would still get their
The
benefits.
key is the word leave. There's something there that is recognizing the fact that that period is covered by something else.
Doesn't affect overtime, which is described in the next policy on the next page, overtime on there, but it's, and which gets confusing. Ultimately, the only department that would see a change in this is PSAP at this point in time. I see no changes in any other departments. I see it being the exact same. So, doesn't mean they can't prove me wrong, because they have done that from time to time with surprising me. But, Dan, don't give your employees any ideas.
Look at the next page in policy 5, and I think we'll hopefully tie up the loose end here. The hours of work, and here again, then we've changed this so that any employee working 32 or more hours per week is classified as a full-time employee. So, and in the next paragraph, it specifically talks about the police department and the jail are on an 80-hour, 2-week scheduling, allowing the department head to flex those employees' work schedules, et cetera. These departments are 24/7. They have their own set of rules for lunches and breaks, things like that. So that's what sets them apart. Is simply the fact that it's police department and jail qualify for those differences, and so.
The other change that's in there is our pay went from Sunday to Saturday to now it's Monday to Sunday.
Monday
So
through
we
Saturday.
changed those dates in there too.
Yep.
And what Paul and I and Rhonda talked about yesterday, rather than trying to put it in our policy book, which specific jobs qualify here and here, we would put that on their job description. You have this classification, you have this classification type of deal.
So would 5.2 not only apply to finance office, but to public works as well?
There's another one for Public Works, 541.
Oh, there's a
Public
different one
Works.
for public works?
Yes, because they are on a different set of schedule.
Yeah, look under 5.4.1.
Okay,
There's Public Works right there.
They're on a 40-hour week, but also on an 8-hour day. So if they work outside of their 8 hours, let's say they work 8.2 hours, that 0.2 hours is an overtime. That's a policy you guys approved over a year ago.
Yep. I think that's federal labor law there too, though.
Nope, sure isn't.
Not
You guys
that.
got to change that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's union that started it, and then you guys just made all of Public Works the same. Because you do have that ability to make it that way.
Yep.
So what that 5.2 would say, and I'm sorry it's not on here, I must not have saved it, it would say standard work week, finance office, PSAP, and certain law enforcement and jail or corrections employees.
We okay with that? Okay, I've got 10 minutes left and we got one policy left.
Two things to tell you.
4.14. Chandra, I'm gonna let you talk about this.
So,
Please.
Austin has heard this one already, because I had brought it to Finance Committee first and foremost, because we didn't have personnel. But anyways, what this is this is a bonus policy for new full-time employees. When we started looking at this, we asked for a clear definition. When are you no longer considered a new employee? Is it at your 6-month probation, which is where we essentially put a lot of things? You're not allowed to use your vacation time until you're at your 6 months. You don't get your first hire bonus until it's 6 months. So that would be HR and city attorney's recommendation to say you're no longer a new employee after 6 months. The finance committee said immediately, you're no longer considered a new employee. You have 2 weeks to move. So that's where we're looking for a clear definition of what a new employee is and how long you're considered a new employee. The other thing they said is, they understand that the housing market is a little sketchy sometimes. So if a new employee wants an extension because they're actively looking and can't find something, then they can ask for an extension on this policy via that committee. So if it's a water sewer employee, then it could go to water sewer committee and they could ask for an
Then
extension.
I've got the wrong committee noted here.
Do you just have personnel?
I put it under personnel.
Honestly, I prefer personnel because we don't do that on camera.
I thought that's where it really belongs.
So that was just
Yeah.
the finance committee's recommendation, that committee, but I just get nervous talking personnel stuff in
So the word
specific
personnel
committees.
should be appropriate?
What are your guys' thoughts? Because my concern is if we start bringing this up in other committees,
I think
we're
you
gonna have to
want
make
one
sure the
committee.
camera's off,
I think one committee on this particular issue should be the one committee. that
Make every decision.
Makes every decision.
Council is then coming out of committee.
It's gonna
that's
come out of
not what you
committee.
guys asked for. You guys asked that committee could make that contract with them essentially.
All this is really doing is saying, okay, they presented logical, compelling information to us on why we should give them a little more than this 6-month period of time to get to still be able to qualify for the moving bonus. What that really is all about.
So you wanna leave it personnel then?
That's my recommendation.
I could tell.
The 6
It
months,
shows, huh?
the 6 month is actually a probationary period.
It is.
Correct.
Yes.
So
that
that's why I think you're
if
still
they don't-
considered a new hire.
At the end of 6 months, with the recommendation of the supervisor, that employee can be let go,
Agree,
no questions asked.
agree. And we don't want to have compensated them for moving to town if we're not gonna keep them.
Well, we will still do that. So if they move to town within the first week, they will get that $1,500.
Oh,
yeah. Okay.
We will not ask for it back. What we're saying.
Whether we decide to keep them or not.
Correct. What we're
Okay.
asking for is how long do they have to move to town to qualify for that
the bonus,
$1,500?
Okay.
That's why we're asking for the definition.
So you're saying, that policy says 6 months
It does.
in order
Now
to
it will.
qualify for it?
It
And-
does now, yeah.
And this is a new policy that would then give them the ability to ask for an extension
Correct.
The
if
current policy
necessary.
does not give you 6 months. The current policy has no definition of when your
Does not
new
define.
Okay.
hire is done.
Yeah,
But we do have a definition of the probationary period.
Yes.
yeah.
So that's why we asked to keep it the same, keep it within that probationary period
Yep.
timeframe.
While you're during that 6-month probationary period, you're a quote, new employee
Yep.
for purposes of this policy.
So item number 3 is what we're really talking about.
Yep, not
Yes,
asking any
yes.
change or any definition on 1 and 2. And we do budget for these type of bonuses in each department. Obviously, some more than others, because some departments, especially Dan's department, they go through a lot of
And the
employees.
new language is gonna say that that it's gonna be paid within the first 6 months,
Or they do not qualify, correct?
whenever they qualify,
Yep.
during the first 6-month period of probation.
That is correct.
Yeah, if they're 4 months in and they move to town, then.
Or it may
that's
be
when they qualify.
extended by approval of the personnel committee.
Right,
So no council vote at all.
correct.
Yep, okay.
Personnel committee will control that, yeah.
When do we normally pay that out?
Whenever they give us proof that they've moved.
So as soon as they have an established account up at the city office?
So it doesn't necessarily have to be an account with the city office. It could be that they just show us that they have mail somewhere and they sign. So we talked about this, I don't remember if Public Works came to last
And it has to
month's.
be in the city limits?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So they sign an
Can't be in Cologne,
affidavit
or it
now.
Can't be at 2 miles outside of town.
Correct.
This says you have to set up utilities in their name and have other,
Or other.
or
proof.
have other proof of
Correct.
residency.
Right.
Because we've
Post Office
had,
Box 202 is not proof of residency.
I agree, and that's why we now have them sign an affidavit.
Yep.
So the affidavit now states, I solemnly swear that I have moved into city limits at this address, even if they would give us their PO box.
Yep.
But we have times where people come in and they move in with their buddy. Or they don't have utilities in their name because the landlord keeps the utilities in their name. So we understand that there's exceptions to that rule, and I would hate to exclude someone just because the landlord says, we want to keep it in our name. I appreciate that the landlord keeps it in their name most of the time when it comes to the utility side of things.
So is it, if we hire somebody and they are like, well, I think our policy says they have to have 15-minute response time if they're on call.
If
Yeah.
they're on call, correct.
So the moving bonus is not available to them if they move 2 miles out
Nope,
of
Correct.
town.
only
Correct.
within city limits.
Yep.
That kind of stuff.
We want them in
That's
winter.
the break.
If you have a really good employee and you can't offer them that moving bonus because they're gonna move into they're gonna live on their parents' place, then they're not gonna come because we can't give them
But
that.
if they're moving to their parents' place, they probably don't need $1,500 bonus.
Correct. Correct.
Well, if I was moving on to my parents' place, I'd need it.
Well, we made it with 5 minutes to spare.
We still have one discussion topic we want to visit with
Oh.
operationally off camera.
Okay.
On camera?
Yep. Pardon me?
Do I have to?
No, no, you don't have to leave. It's not executive session, I just